Hey, welcome to Viking Preparedness. I am Pastor Joe Fox. Welcome to another in the series on community. Today, I think I'm going to talk about money. Money's important. You know, you've come up with your purpose for your community, and you've decided to form an intentional community. You know, proximity. You're actually going to be living near each other. And so let's look at intentional community where the entire group is living on a piece of land. Okay, there's so many aspects to money, but we'll get into some generalities. One way to do community, one way communities are done today in the United States is what I call the all-in principle. And what that means is that when you join this community, you join a family, basically, and all your money now becomes all the family's money. Most Americans go, I can't do that. Yeah, most Americans aren't cut out for intentional community. Intentional community is for a very few people. But a way to do it is all your money goes into a pot, if you will. Now, what's that look like, right? It depends. Some communities, when you come in, you have to sell all your houses and cars and cash in your 401ks and your bank accounts and all that, and all that comes with you. I know of 3 different communities that do that. And so all that money goes to the community. Now, how does the community decide how your former money is spent, right? How is it allocated? That varies. In some communities, every adult has a vote. So there's a pot of money and the adults vote. And you know, you can be a little bit more sophisticated about that. The community can decide, you know, we're going to allocate so much every month, let's say, to this committee and that committee and that committee. And then we have money left over. Many communities who are all-in communities generate income in the community. They run a business or businesses that also brings money into the community, and then that community allocates itself an allowance, right? And that could be an allowance by household or an allowance by individual. And so the community is bringing this much money in, and we decide as a community, you know what, we're going to give everybody, every adult, you know, $300 and every kid $50 a month. You know, okay, is that good or bad? I don't know. It depends what the community is providing. You know, is the community providing your housing? Is the community providing your utilities and your food? Then that's not bad, right? Getting that money. Well, what about the people who come in and give up all their possessions and they give $400 million and somebody else comes in and they're on welfare? That's not fair. Yeah, it's not about fair. It's about, do you want to be part of this community or not? And so that's a way, all in. Another way is everyone is in this community and you just join and your money's your money and Bob's money's Bob's money, but how does the land get paid for in that case? In some cases, I guess you could have, you know, a rich daddy Warbucks who just buys the land and says, yeah, I'd like you to live here, you owe me nothing. That's rare. A lot of these communities where you get to keep your money, there's a buy-in fee. You know, you're buying into a community that we've been living on, let's say, for 20 years, and in that 20 years, we've sunk $3.4 million into this property, not counting the cost of the property, you know, whatever, I'm just making up numbers. And so if you want to join this community, you have to pay so much money up front, and then you have to rent your space in the community. And so that's a way people do it. And typically those communities who do that, the joining fee goes up every year because there's more infrastructure. Right? You know, there are more paved roads, there's more running water, there's more solar power, dun, 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 dun. And so that's a way that some people do it also. Another way is you just come here and you buy a plot of land. You know, we're going to sell you or lease you. Maybe they'll lease you, you know, a piece of a 1/4 acre land that you can put a home on. Or we'll lease you the home, you know, the actual home itself, and that will cost X amount a month. And for that, you can live here, but you're on your own for food and clothing and everything else. And so that's another way. It all goes back to what is the purpose of your community. At Shofar Mountain, we started out as an all-in community. And some people who came to Shofar Mountain had money, and some people did not have any money. And it was kind of interesting to watch the dynamic there. With these particular individuals, it's about half and half too. About half the people had no money, about half the people had good money. The people who had no money treated everything badly, like they didn't respect it, right? Because they didn't have to earn the money to pay for that chainsaw, and so they'd leave that chainsaw out in the rain, or they'd break it. I went on a lot of business trips back then, and every time I came back, something of mine would be broken, right? Other people's stuff wouldn't be broken, but my stuff would be broken, because we were all in and we let everyone share. On the other hand, there were some people with money who were really stingy with their money, even though it was an all-in community. And I'll give you an example. There were 3 pickup trucks on the land. I owned 2, and another guy owned a brand new pickup truck. My pickup truck was the pickup truck that we went to get rocks for the aquaponics system and mulch, that we just got mulch and mulch and mulch and mulch in the early days. But the nice pickup truck, oh no, we couldn't use that for anything. It might get a scratch on it. So it's okay to use Pastor Joe's truck, but it's not okay to use my truck. Your truck, this is how they go. Pastor Joe's truck is my truck, but my truck is my truck. And so you get those dynamics going on too. In my dealings with people, I find that people who have nothing or very little are all for an all-in community. But people who have a lot of money, who've earned it, and what's a lot? A lot is relative. But people who have earned a lot of money, they're not so anxious to put all their money in and get rid of it. I get that. If you read in Acts 2, it says, they had all things in common. What does that mean? It says if anyone had need, they would sell lands and gather money and give it to that person who had need. I think I understand that. And I think what it was is people did own personal things and personal lands. Obviously, if, Sally's daughter Jill needs her wisdom teeth pulled out and they got no money, well, I've got a piece of land in Williamsburg, Virginia, and so I'm going to sell that 4 acres, generate some cash, and we'll pay, I'll give it so that we can pay for this little girl's teeth. I think it was like that. And having all things in common was like, hey man, can I borrow your truck? Yeah, absolutely, man. My truck's your truck. Hey, can I borrow your truck? It ought to be, yeah, absolutely. My truck's your truck. That's all things in common. It's still my truck, but you can borrow it, and I hold things loosely. There's the guy who comes to Yeshua, to Jesus, and he goes, hey, what do I have to do to inherit the kingdom of heaven? And he goes, keep the commandments. And he goes, which ones? And, Yeshua, Jesus, starts listing them all off. And he goes, I've done all that from the time I was a kid. And he goes, oh, okay, well then just sell everything you have and come and follow me. And he's like, ooh, can't do that. And he walks away. And the disciples think it's a hard thing. If that's the case, how can anyone come to the kingdom of heaven? And Yeshua says what's impossible with man is possible with Yah, with God. It wasn't about the stuff the guy had. It wasn't about all the money and the fact that he had to sell it all and give it to the poor. It was that he personally was clinging to his possessions like some people cling to a pickup truck or a saw or a gun or a whatever. No, this is mine and you can't use it. It's like, dude, that's the wrong attitude. I talked to a very wise man, Pastor Dal. I talk to him all the time, but I talked to him a couple years ago about writing rules for a community. And he's like, you know what, Pastor? All those rules, those rules are for people who break rules. What you need to do is discern the spirit of the people who are coming, because if the people have the right spirit, it doesn't matter. If people have the right spirit in a community, you don't need any money rules, right? It's just like, hey, everything's going to happen. But we're people, right? And people are flawed. Currently at Shofar Mountain, we're playing with a thing where the people who move to the land pay 30% of their income as a rent, right? That's rent to live on the land. And then that 30% doesn't just go into, a pocket and disappear, buy Pastor Joe a yellow Humvee. That 30% goes into a pot, and then all the adult members of the community sit down and we discuss the needs we have for the community. And it's like, okay, we need to pave this road, we need more gravel on this road, we need a water tower here, we need this, these things are going to cost money, what do we want to spend money on? And then we will decide as a group what we're going to spend or not spend our money on. And that's what we're going to do with that rent. And so it's rent, but it's rent that goes directly to the improvement of the place where you live, right? So it's not really like renting a house where you pay the landlord and the landlord goes to Cozumel with all the rent money he's making. And so we're trying that. Stuff costs money. You know, just the other day we had a backhoe. I took a load of railroad ties. We got 3 conduits, steel conduits. And there was someone there who's thinking about starting a community, and I don't really think they thought about the money aspects of it. And I'm saying, you see this? That's over $1,000 right there. You know, that's $1,000 for renting that backhoe. That's $1,000 of stuff coming off that truck. And if we had to pay that backhoe operator, which we didn't, but if we had to pay him, that'd be about $1,000. So that's $3,000. You go 1,000, 1,000, 1,000. That's $3,000 right there for just doing this pond and this little bit of road work that we're doing. Stuff costs money, right? So the money's got to come from somewhere, and people have to chip in so that their community is a nice place to live. Are you going to eat all your meals together? If you are, how are you going to work that? Is it going to be potluck, or is it going to be, you know, we have a little fund and then from that fund we buy our community meals? Again, it all comes back to the purpose of you and your community. There are people, you know, that's another thing. If you make people pay a point, like some people say, hey, to live here it's $2,500 a month. I've seen that on community. What if you're poor? What if your family's poor and they can't afford that, but you want that family to live here? Well, then what people do sometimes is they'll say, okay, everyone has to pay X amount, let's just make up numbers, $2,500 a month to live here, plus you have to work 10 hours a month on the land on a community project. If you don't have $2,500, we will let you work at the rate of $10 an hour on the land to make up some of that, you know, so you can work more than 10 hours on the land. And that's the way some people do it. A good book, a really good book to buy is called Creating a Life Together. You can get it on Amazon, and it's all about intentional communities, and it looks at a bunch of different communities and how they do money. There is no right way, there is no wrong way, there's only the way that fits your group, that fits with your purpose and what you're trying to accomplish. Just understand this, it costs money. Right? It costs money to build a community. You're not going to go out there and just build a community out of, you know, cob, right? You know, mud and straw, clay and straw and sand, and, you know, put that together. You still got to buy stuff. You still got to eat. You still have to put gas and propane and shoes and dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. So it's going to take money, and you're going to have to put some thought into that as a community. How are we going to get our money? How are we going to spend our money? How are we going to allocate our money? All right, just some things to think about. No real answers there, because again, the answer is up to you and the way you and those that are with you decide to do community. But there are things to think about. Don't exclude the poor people who would otherwise be a good asset to your community just because they're poor. You got to think about that. All right, I'll see you out there.